Andrew Wyeth is one of America's most celebrated artists, known for his paintings that are emotionally evocative and accessible in their representational subject matter. But is he really a representational artist? As an abstract fine artist, I have come to really revere Andrew Wyeth's work, and I consider him an abstract artist, and he considered himself an abstract artist. So I'm going to share with you why that is and what we as abstract artists can learn from studying his paintings. Hey everyone, welcome to Whole Artist Mastery. I'm Marianne Mitchell, and I've been a professional fine artist for about 40 years. And for the last decade, I've been mentoring artists who want to own their voice, make compelling work, and understand how they want to show up in the world as an artist. I love sharing my knowledge and wealth of experience with everyone. So if you like what you see, subscribe and make sure you hit that little bell to get notifications when the latest videos are released. So I'm inspired to share with you my thoughts about Andrew Wyeth as an abstract painter, really because I was recently watching a video that Ian Roberts made about artistic growth. And he talks about an interview, and I'm going to paraphrase the interview, that Andrew Wyeth gave to Horizon magazine, which was a magazine back in the 50s and 60s. I think it might have been in 1961 that this interview took place, about his work and how he saw himself as an artist. And huge surprise, Andrew Wyeth admitted that he had doubts or was pushing himself beyond where he was artistically, despite having tremendous commercial success and really being one of the most celebrated artists of the 20th century. He was struggling, might be too strong a word, but he really wanted to move away from being a representational painter, and he liked to call himself an abstract painter. I once heard Jamie Wyeth talk about Andrew Wyeth, and he mentioned that Andrew always started a painting in the abstract, which was totally surprising to me. And so one of the things that Ian, I think, is really trying to point out here is that whatever stage you are as an artist in your growth, whether you're just beginning or you're one of America's most celebrated artists, there's this challenge, this pull to continue growing and searching and going beyond your comfort zone. And I think that's what Andrew Wyeth was really saying in this interview, and that he was aspiring greatly to capturing the essence of the feeling of what a scene was giving him, or his relationship with a person that he had, what those emotional feelings were. He wanted to have that be the star of the show in his work, as opposed to the figure or the actual representational objects that he quoted as talking about as props, which Ian mentions in the interview. And so I find that fascinating because I think that's what abstract artists are doing, is that rather than using real life representational imagery, either from photos or from real life or en plein air as landscape, we are trying to capture something beyond that image. And by the way, I know many representational artists who are also doing the same thing. So we're really talking about a fuzzy line between representation and abstraction. So in my opinion, the definition of abstraction, whether it's applied to working with representational imagery, subject matter, or non-objective subject matter, is to capture that essence, the essence of emotion, the essence, the sensory experience, going beyond the concrete understanding of a person, of a situation, of a scene. So how does all this apply to being an abstract painter and learning from Andrew Wyeth's paintings? Well, it's so interesting when you have conversations that are aligning exactly with what you've just been thinking about. And that has just happened with me in a recent conversation I had with a mentorship artist that I'm working with, where he was talking about wanting to orchestrate line and value and shape and color to move the viewer's eye through his abstract compositions. And I said, oh my gosh, I'm just getting ready to do a video about this very thing in terms of learning how to do that from Andrew Wyeth's compositions, because he is brilliant at orchestrating his use of line, color, shape, value, and texture to move you, the viewer, through his composition, to have you see the story your way as opposed to having it be his way. In other words, you get to move through his compositions and get the essence of the scene, but each person who looks at his work can interpret it totally differently, just like an abstraction. So for me, a strong abstract composition does the same thing. It moves you, the viewer, through the composition so that you come out with this overall sense and really being moved in whatever way you're moved by in looking at the abstract painting. So I'm going to give you a little presentation with 3 Andrew Wyeth paintings and walk you through how I think he's using composition to express and to get his story across to those of us who are looking at the paintings. So before I do that, I invite you to go to the Whole Artist Mastery website, subscribe, and when you subscribe and put your email address in, you will get the free introductory guide to Whole Artist Mastery. And the reason I'm asking you to do this now, if you can, is because in that guide I have what I call compositional checkpoints, which relate directly to what I'm going to be talking about as I look at Andrew Wyeth's compositions. These are checkpoints that I have come up with over the many years of tearing my hair out trying to understand if my if my compositions work or not. And I find them very effective and simple to understand for myself as well as most people who employ them. And they work whatever painting you're looking at, whether it's your piece or a Matisse or an Andrew Wyeth. So go do that and join me in my little photo presentation. I love this particular Wyeth painting because I believe that he's telling you what's important in the story of this painting through his use of composition, and yet there's so much left open for interpretation for us, the viewer. So to illustrate this, I'm going to use the checkpoint, the quadrant checkpoint, which is when you divide a painting into 4 quadrants and you look at a relationship or more between the upper left quadrant and the lower right quadrant, the upper right quadrant and the lower left quadrant, because it's these diagonal relationships that move your eye all around the composition. So remember that we always enter a composition, whether consciously or unconsciously, from the upper left part of a painting, because we read from left to right and top to bottom. At least that's the way it is in the Western world. And so whatever is happening in the upper left quadrant needs to have something in the lower right quadrant for it to lead to. And in this case, this line here points you into the middle of the composition, and this line down here takes you out. And the nature of this line is similar to the way this line is articulated. So they have something in common. It's what I call having a conversation with each other. In the upper right quadrant and the lower left quadrant, the line of this branch is also pulling you into the center and down to this quadrant here, where this line takes you on out into the center of the bottom and over to this line and out of the composition. So through this dynamic orchestration of line and perspective, your eye is moved all around the composition. Let's move on to the next painting. This is one of my favorite paintings of his as well. This is called Snow Hill. And there's a lot to look at here. So I'm just going to point out a few things that I find compelling about how you move around this painting. And if you look closely at the lines here of every single figure, they're all very similar. They all have this convex and concave movement, whether it's the legs or the particular garments that each human being is wearing, whether they're male or female. And then you look at the braid here, which is moving very similarly to the leg here. And then you go beyond the figures and out into the field, and you see that the lines of the roads are moving very similarly in nature of line to the braid, which is moving similarly to the nature of the line here of the edge of the jacket, and so on. The other thing I want to draw your attention to is the sense of light, the value play here, and how the lightest light in the whole painting is showcasing the houses way out in the distance. And where the figures are is very gray and dull, as is the sky. So it's an interesting play on these figures who are clearly dancing around and having a lot of fun in very toned down clothing in the shadow, looking out over the land, which is much brighter than where they are. So there's a lot of story elements there that we can play with in our own imaginations. And lastly, this is another favorite of mine. And I really feel like this is somewhat self-explanatory, that it feels like this is a dream world. And we know this because of his incredible use of light and shadow here, and where he's placed the dog, the sleeping dog, and where he's placed the house that is lit up brilliantly by the high value contrast between the light and the dark, and the relationship between the house, the dog, and the streaming light that's coming in through the window, and the river here, which is lit up as well. So he's very clearly using light and value contrast to tell you a story in this painting. I hope that you have found my thoughts about Andrew Wyeth and how he is an abstract artist and how we all can learn from his compositions and his ability to really go beyond the representational realm into the realm of magic. And by the way, there was a huge retrospective of his work in 2006 here in Philadelphia at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and the title of the show was Memory and Magic. And I had never seen his work. This is a sad statement, but I had never seen his work in person. And that may be true for many of you. We're all so used to seeing Christina in posters everywhere and many of his other most famous paintings. But you have to see his work in person to really understand what I'm talking about in terms of the depth of feeling that he captures in his marks and his color choices and his compositions. And whether you're an abstract painter or a representational painter, there's so much to glean by really studying his paintings. So I invite you to do that if you possibly can. There's the Brandywine Museum of Art here in Philadelphia. If you're in the Maine area, there's a couple of the Portland Museum of Art, I think, has permanent collections. Um, I find him a fascinating artist. And one last thing I want to leave you with, for those of you who were unable to attend art school for whatever reason, and you're devoting yourself to being an artist, full-time artist, or, really just searching for your expression through making visual art. A lot of people who work with me express, I guess, insecurity that they never went to art school. Well, guess what? Andrew Wyeth didn't go to art school either. N.C. Wyeth, who was his father, who was a very famous illustrator, taught Andrew Wyeth at home. And he taught Andrew Wyeth all the basics of composition and how to draw that you learn in art school. But NC was quite adamant about the fact that he felt that if Andrew went to art school, he would be unable to develop his own true voice and to tap into his own personal depth of expression. Because in art school, they tell you how to do things as opposed to allowing you to feel and then responding to that through the educational curriculum. I had that personal experience myself in art school. So I wanted to share that because I think it's so important for those of you who feel like you're wanting because you missed out on art school. You have a great opportunity to develop from the inside out as opposed to from the outside in. So thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment and tell me your thoughts down below. I love to hear what you have to say, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video.